I never thought I would be the one to feel invisible. For most of my life, people listened when I spoke. They noticed when I entered a room, they asked for my opinion. I was the mother, the center of the family, the one who held everything together. But life has a quiet way of changing things. It does not warn you. It does not explain itself. It just slowly moves you to the side. I am Saad's mother, and this is the story of how family gatherings, the very place where I once felt strongest, slowly made me feel unseen. When my son Saad got married to Sana, I believed our family was becoming complete. Sana was polite, soft-spoken, always smiling. She tried very hard to fit in. At first, I admired that. At family gatherings, she was always moving, serving food, refilling cups, cleaning without being asked. People praised her. She is so capable, they said, so well-mannered. I nodded proudly. I thought this meant harmony. I did not realize that something else was happening quietly beneath the surface. Family gatherings used to revolve around me. People came to see me, ask how I was. Sit beside me. I chose the menu. I decided the seating. I guided the conversations. That was my role for many years. But after Saad's marriage, the rhythm shifted. It was subtle. At first, people asked Sana questions about her cooking, about her work. I welcomed that. She was the new one. It was natural. But slowly, fewer eyes turned toward me. People would arrive and look past me, searching for Sana. Where is Sana? They asked. Is she in the kitchen? She always was. I sat on the sofa, hands folded, listening to the sounds of plates and voices. At first, I felt relieved. I had carried the weight of gatherings for so long. Maybe this was rest. But rest should feel peaceful. This did not. One evening, during a family dinner, I noticed something strange. I spoke, and no one responded. Not because they were rude, but because they were distracted. Sana was bringing food. Saad was talking to his cousins. The conversation moved on without me. I stopped mid-sentence. No one noticed. That moment stayed with me. I watched Sana move around the room, busy and quiet. I watched my son laugh, relaxed in a way I had not seen in years. And I sat there, feeling like a piece of furniture, present but not involved. Family gatherings became louder, but I felt smaller. I began to hear my own voice less. Sometimes I wondered if I had spoken at all. I noticed Sana rarely sat down. When she did, someone called her name. Sana, can you help? Sana, come here. She always stood up immediately. I saw myself in her. That scared me, because I knew what it felt like to disappear while serving others. One afternoon, after guests left, I sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet. Sana was in the kitchen, cleaning as always. Saad passed by me. Good gathering, he said. I smiled. Yes, I replied. But inside, I felt empty. No one had asked me how I was there. No one had sat beside me. I had hosted everyone. Yet I felt like a guest in my own home. The strange part was this. No one had done anything wrong. There was no argument, no disrespect. Just a slow shift. And those are the hardest changes to speak about. Because how do you explain silence? How do you explain being replaced without being pushed? I began to realize that family gatherings were no longer about connection for me. They were reminders. Reminders that my role had changed, that my voice was softer now, that my place was no longer at the center. I watched Sana carefully. She smiled the same way I used to, she stayed quiet the same way I once did. And I wondered if she felt invisible too. Or if she thought this was what love looked like. Sometimes, I wanted to tell her to sit down. To rest. Speak. But the words never came out. Because I had taught her this life without realizing it. At gatherings, people praised Sana's efforts. She manages everything so well, they said. I nodded again. Pride and guilt mixed inside me. Because while they praised her, they forgot me. And while they forgot me, I let it happen. I told myself this was the natural order. Parents step back, children step forward. But stepping back should not feel like erasing yourself. One evening, while everyone was talking, I looked around the room. The table was full. the house was alive. And yet, I felt alone. That was the moment I understood something painful. You can be surrounded by family and still feel invisible. And sometimes, the silence you create for others becomes the silence that swallows you too. This is not a story about blame. It is a story about quiet changes, about roles that shift without discussion, about women who serve so much that they forget themselves. This is the story of how family gatherings taught me what invisibility feels like, and how I finally began to see it. When I began to feel invisible, I did not recognize it right away. I told myself it was aged, I told myself it was changed, I told myself this was what mothers were supposed to accept. But the heart does not understand explanations, it only understands feeling. And the feeling was this. I was slowly disappearing in rooms I once filled. At family gatherings, I started choosing seats near the wall. Not because anyone asked me to, but because it felt easier. From there, I could watch everything without being part of it. I watched Sana move from one person to another, her hands always busy, her smile always ready. I watched Saad lean forward in conversations, relaxed and confident. I watched others speak over me without noticing. Once, during a gathering, someone asked a question about an old family matter. I knew the answer, I had lived it. I opened my mouth to speak. Before I could finish the first word, someone else answered. Wrongly. Everyone nodded. I closed my mouth again. Correcting them felt unnecessary and suddenly, exhausting. That was new for me. I used to correct gently, I used to guide. Now, I let things pass. Silence became easier than effort. And silence slowly became my place. Sometimes, in the middle of loud conversations, I felt a strange ringing in my ears. Not noise, but absence, like I was watching life through glass. I wondered if this was how Sana felt too. But she never stopped moving long enough to feel it. I noticed how no one asked Sana to sit. And how no one asked me to speak. Different roles. Same disappearance. One evening after a long gathering, I stayed awake in bed. Saad and Sana were asleep in the next room. I listened to the house breathe. I thought about all the years I had stood in kitchens during gatherings. All the times I had served quietly. I thought about how proud I felt doing it. And I wondered when pride turned into invisibility. The next gathering came sooner than I expected. Relatives arrived, early voices filled the house. I stayed seated this time. I wanted to see what would happen. Sana still stood up first. Still took charge. People still praised her. No one looked at me. I realized then that invisibility does not require rejection. It only requires replacement. And replacement does not always come with cruelty. Sometimes it comes wrapped in appreciation for someone else. I saw Sana glance at me once that day. Just once. Her eyes met mine briefly. There was something there. Not disrespect. Not coldness. Something like confusion. Maybe she wondered why I stayed seated. Or maybe she wondered if this would be her future too. That thought hurt more than my own silence. Because I did not want this for her. But I had shown her this path. I had taught her without words that this is what good women do. They step back. They stay quiet. They disappear politely. That realization stayed with me long after the guests left. At another gathering, someone asked Sana about a recipe. She explained patiently. I listened. That recipe was mine. I had taught it to her. No one knew. And for the first time I felt something close to resentment. Not toward Sana. Toward myself. Because I had allowed my presence to fade so completely. I had mistaken silence for dignity for too long. I began to notice how often people spoke around me. They discussed plans. Decisions. Future gatherings. I was there. But not consulted. Sometimes they would look at me only to confirm something already decided. He nodded. Always nodding. That nod became my signature. At one gathering a relative asked, "Is this okay?" Not looking at me. Looking at Sana. She answered kindly. I stayed quiet. Inside me a small voice whispered, "This used to be you." And another voice replied, "You gave it away." That night, I cried quietly in the bathroom. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just tears sliding down in silence. I cried for the woman I used to be. And for the woman Sanaa was becoming. I cried because I realized something painful. You can be surrounded by family and still feel alone. And sometimes the loneliness is not because others push you away. Sometimes it is because you step back too far. Family gatherings continued. And with each one the feeling deepened. I began to feel like a guest in my own home. I waited to be told where to sit. What time to eat. When things were finished. No one meant to make me feel that way. That made it harder. Because how do you explain pain that no one caused on purpose? One afternoon, I watched Sanaa clear the table alone. Everyone else was talking. I almost called her name. Almost told her to sit. But the words caught in my throat. Because who was I to tell her to do what I never did for myself? The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid that speaking up would sound like jealousy. Afraid that people would think I wanted attention. So I stayed quiet. And the quiet grew heavier. There is a moment in every life when you realize something is wrong. Not loudly, but clearly. For me, that moment came during a simple gathering. Nothing special. I sat there, surrounded by voices, and realized no one would notice if I left the room. That thought shook me. I stood up quietly and walked to the kitchen. No one looked. No one paused. I stood there alone, hands resting on the counter. And I finally admitted the truth to myself. Family gatherings made me feel invisible. Not because my family did not love me, but because I stopped asking to be seen. And because I taught others how to look past me. That realization was painful. But it was also the beginning of something else. Something I did not yet understand. Before I became the woman who sat quietly at the edge of family gatherings, I was someone very different. I was strong once. Not loud, but steady. I built this home with my hands and my patience. Every corner of it carries my effort. When Saad was born, my life became clear that I knew my purpose. I raised him with care. With discipline. With love that never asked for anything back. I taught him respect, that I taught him responsibility. People used to say, "Your son listens to you." And he did. Our home was always open to others. Relatives came often. Neighbors stopped by. Family gatherings were my world. I planned them carefully, that I cooked for hours. I made sure everyone felt welcome. People noticed. They came to me with questions. They waited for my decisions. Felt needed. Felt present. Those gatherings were not easy, but they were mine. As years passed, Saad grew into a quiet man. Kind, thoughtful. When the time came for his marriage, I prayed for a good woman. Someone gentle. Someone respectful. When Sanaa entered our lives, I felt relief. She was polite from the beginning. Soft in her voice. Careful with her words. She greeted elders properly. She listened more than she spoke. I saw myself in her. First, I thought that was a good thing. I welcomed her into my home with an open heart, that I showed her where things were kept. I explained how gatherings usually worked. I believed I was guiding her. I did not realize I was also shaping her silence. In the early days, I stayed very involved. During gatherings, I still led everything. Sanaa watched closely. She followed my movements. Learned my routines. I thought she was learning how to belong. Slowly, I began stepping back. Not because I was tired, but because I believed this was the natural way. A mother steps back, a daughter-in-law steps forward. That is what I had been taught. So I let Sanaa serve more, I let her speak when people asked about food. People praised her. She is very capable, they said. Felt proud. She was representing our home well. But praise has a way of shifting attention. And attention is a powerful thing. Family gatherings started feeling different. People looked to Sanaa first for tea, for plates, for arrangements. I stayed seated more often. First it felt like rest. After many years of standing, sitting felt like relief. But relief slowly turned into distance. I noticed people stopped asking me small things. They did not mean harm. They simply adjusted. Sana was quicker, younger, always ready. I watched her move through the house during gatherings. She rarely sat down. And when she did, someone called her name. Sana, can you help? Sana, come here. She always responded immediately, just like I used to. I should have recognized the pattern. But when you are inside a pattern, it feels normal. Saad seemed happy. That mattered to me. He laughed more during gatherings, he spoke freely. I saw him relax in ways he had not before. I told myself this was success. This was what a mother wanted. But success should not feel like erasure. Over time, my role became unclear. I was no longer leading. But I was not resting either. I existed somewhere in between. People still respected me. But they did not rely on me. That shift was quiet. And quiet shifts are the hardest to accept. One day during a gathering, I realized something. I did not know the plan. When food would be served. Who was coming next time? I used to know these things. Now I waited to be told. I did not complain. Smiled. Inside, a small confusion began to grow. I told myself this was age. That it was time to let go. But letting go should feel freeing. This felt empty. I noticed Sana rarely looked at me during gatherings. Not out of disrespect, but out of focus. She was busy. And busy people do not see quietly sitting ones. I saw myself becoming furniture. Useful once. Now decorative. Still there. Still respected. But not involved. Late at night, I thought about my own early years as a daughter-in-law. I remembered standing for hours. Serving without being asked. I remembered feeling proud of my strength. I wondered if this was simply the cycle repeating. But knowing something is a cycle does not make it less painful. I had believed that if I did everything right, I would always feel needed. No one told me that doing everything right can sometimes make you invisible. As Saad settled into married life, I noticed small changes in him. They were not bad changes. Just quiet ones. He came home tired more often, he spoke less about his thoughts. He still respected me. Still asked if I needed anything. But he no longer looked to me the way he once did. That is the natural way of things, people say. A son grows, a mother steps back. Accepted that. What I did not expect was how empty that space would feel. Before, Saad used to ask my opinion on family matters, on gatherings, on decisions. Now, he listened quietly when others spoke. When I spoke, he nodded. But nodding is not the same as listening. I saw him slowly become a bridge between two worlds. 1 foot with me, 1 foot with Sana. And like most bridges, he learned to stay still. Sana tried very hard to please everyone. I could see it in her eyes. She woke early on gathering days. She planned everything in her head. Sometimes I would find her standing in the kitchen, lost in thought. "Are you okay?" he asked once. She smiled quickly. "Yes," she said. "Just thinking about the guests." That smile reminded me of my younger self. Always thinking of others. Never stopping to ask what I needed. At first, I guided her gently. I showed her how I used to manage things. I corrected her when something was not done the usual way. She listened carefully. She never argued. That obedience felt comforting to me. I thought it meant respect. I did not realize it also meant she was learning to disappear. As time passed, I corrected her less. Not because she stopped making mistakes, but because she stopped making choices. She followed routines perfectly. And routines do not require conversation. Family gatherings became smoother. Everything happened on time. Guests were happy. From the outside, everything looked peaceful. But peace on the outside does not mean peace inside. I began to notice that no one asked Sana how she felt. And no one asked me either. We were both functioning. And functioning women are often overlooked. One afternoon, after a long gathering, I sat alone in the living room. Sana was cleaning in the kitchen. Saad was on his phone. I looked around the room. The furniture was the same. The walls were the same. But I felt like a guest. That feeling frightened me. This was my home. I had built it with years of effort. Yet I felt unsure of my place in it. I realized that somewhere along the way I had stopped speaking. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I did not want to disturb the calm. Calm can become a cage when it is protected at all costs. I noticed Sana doing the same. During gatherings, if someone spoke over her, she stopped. If someone ignored her comment, she smiled and moved on. I watched this happen again and again. And each time, something heavy settled in my chest. I wanted to tell her it was okay to speak. But the words felt hollow coming from me. Because I had not spoken for myself either. Saad remained unaware. Not because he did not care, but because silence looks like peace from the outside. One evening after guests left, I mentioned something small to him. "You seemed quiet today," I said. He smiled. "I'm just tired," he replied. That was his answer to everything. Tired. I understood tiredness. I had lived with it for years. But I also knew that tiredness can hide other things. Things we do not want to face. As months passed, I began to feel a strange mix of pride and loss. Pride in Sana's capability. Loss of my own presence. People praised her often. "She manages everything so well," they said. Smiled. I agreed. But inside, a quiet sadness grew. Because once they said those things about me. And now no one said them at all. I was no longer the woman they noticed. I was the woman they assumed would always be there. Assumption can erase appreciation. I began to realize that my invisibility did not start when Sana arrived. It started when I believed my value was only in what I provided. When I stopped believing my voice mattered. When I taught others without words to look past me. This realization came slowly. In moments of quiet. In long evenings. In the space between gatherings. I thought about my own mother. How she used to sit quietly while we moved around her. How I never noticed her silence until it was too late. That memory stayed with me. Scared me. 'Cause I saw myself walking the same path. And I saw Sana following behind me. I began to wonder what would happen if neither of us spoke. If both of us stayed quiet. Who would notice? Family gatherings continued to come and go. Each one left me feeling a little smaller. Not broken. Just reduced. I still loved my family. I still wanted everyone to be happy. But I began to understand something important. Love without voice can turn into loneliness. And service without acknowledgement can turn into invisibility. I did not yet know how to change this. But I knew something needed to change. Because silence was no longer protecting peace. The change did not arrive suddenly. It crept in slowly. Like evening light fading without notice. First I told myself nothing was wrong. That families change. That roles shift. But a quiet discomfort began following me into every gathering. I started feeling tense before guests even arrived. I would sit and listen to the sounds of preparation. The clatter of plates. The soft footsteps of Sana moving back and forth. She did everything carefully. Too carefully. I could hear it in the way she placed things down gently as if afraid of making noise. That fear was familiar to me. It was the fear of taking up space. During one gathering, relatives discussed plans for an upcoming wedding in the family. They spoke excitedly. Dates were suggested, venues mentioned. I listened closely. This was something I used to manage. I waited for someone to ask me. No one did. Instead, Sana was called. "Sana, what do you think?" someone asked. I paused. She glanced at me quickly. Just for a moment. Then she answered. Her voice was soft. "I think whatever you decide is fine." People nodded. The discussion moved on. I felt a strange twist inside me. It was not anger. It was loss. I realized I was not part of the decision anymore. And Sana was not truly part either. She was asked. But not really heard. That moment stayed with me. I noticed how often Sana was called, yet rarely included. How often she spoke, yet rarely shaped anything. And how often I was neither called nor included. Two women, standing in different corners of the same silence. As gatherings continued, small misunderstandings began to appear. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just moments that left a mark. One evening, Sana forgot to serve tea to one guest. It was an honest mistake. She was tired. The guest mentioned it lightly. "Oh, no tea today," they said, smiling. Sana apologized immediately. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'll bring it now." Before she could move, I stood up. "I'll get it," I said. My voice surprised even me. The room went quiet for a second. Sana froze. She looked at me. Something unreadable passed between us. "I'll do it," she said quickly. She stood up before I could respond. She moved fast, almost rushed. I sat back down. My heart was beating faster than it should have. That moment felt like a quiet clash. Not between us, but between roles. I realized then that my attempts to step back in were confusing. To Sanada, to others. They did not know what to do with me anymore. And Sana did not know whether to sit or stand. I had created this confusion by stepping back without speaking, by never clearly letting go, and never clearly staying. After that, Sana seemed even more careful around me. She watched my expressions. If I moved, she stopped. If I stayed seated, she hesitated. I did not want this tension, but it was there. Saad noticed something was different. One night, after a gathering, he asked quietly, "Is everything okay?" Smiled. "Yes," I said. That was my answer to everything. But the truth was, something was building. Quiet pressure. At another gathering, I overheard a conversation in the kitchen. Two relatives were speaking softly. "Sana works very hard," one said. "Yes, but she looks tired," the other replied. I stood still. They had not noticed me. Their words were not unkind, but they made me uneasy. 'Cause no one ever said those things about me anymore. No one noticed if I was tired. I realized then that invisibility does not mean absence. It means being overlooked even when present. Sana's tiredness became more visible. Mine had become normal. One afternoon, Sana came to me before a gathering. She spoke hesitantly. "Ami," she said softly, using the respectful word for mother. "Should I do everything the usual way?" I looked at her. She was waiting. Not for instructions. For permission. That moment weighed heavily on me. "Yes," I said slowly. "Do what feels right." She nodded. But I could see confusion in her eyes. She wanted clarity. And I gave her none. 'Cause I did not know myself. That was the beginning of real tension. Not arguments, but uncertainty. I began to feel restless during gatherings. I shifted in my seat. I watched too closely. I noticed every small thing. Who spoke, who did not. Who served, who sat. And with every gathering, the feeling grew. This was no longer just about me. It was about Sana too. I saw how she avoided sitting near me. Not out of disrespect, but out of fear of doing something wrong. I saw how she stayed in the kitchen longer. As if hiding was safer than choosing. One evening, during a gathering, someone asked a question about a family matter from years ago. Again, I knew the answer. Again, someone else answered incorrectly. Again, I stayed quiet. But this time, Sana looked at me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She chose silence too. That hurt more than being ignored. Because now, my silence was spreading. After the guests left, I sat alone. The house felt heavy. Sana was cleaning quietly. I watched her. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words did not come. Because once silence becomes habit, speaking feels like breaking a rule. I realized then that conflict does not always announce itself. Sometimes it grows in the space where words should be. Family gatherings became emotional minefields. Every small action felt loaded. If I stood up, Sana rushed that if I stayed seated, I felt useless. If Sana sat, I felt guilty. If she stood, I felt ashamed. There was no comfortable place anymore. Saad remained unaware. Or perhaps he sensed something but did not know how to name it. Men often mistake quiet tension for calm. One night, I lay awake thinking about everything. I asked myself a hard question. Had I stepped back too far? Or had I never taught myself how to exist without control? And more importantly, had I passed this burden to Sanaa without realizing it? That question stayed with me. Because now, family gatherings were no longer just making me feel invisible. They were creating a quiet distance between me and the woman who had entered my life with respect and trust. And that distance was growing. As the days passed, the unease followed me everywhere. It was no longer limited to gatherings. It lived in the quiet moments between them. I began to notice changes in Sanaa that worried me. She smiled less easily. Her movements were still quick, but heavier. Sometimes I found her standing still in the kitchen, staring at nothing. "What are you thinking about?" he asked once. She startled slightly. "Nothing," she said quickly. That word again. Nothing. It is often the word people use when they are carrying too much. During the next family gathering, the tension felt closer to the surface. Not visible, but thick. People arrived. Greetings were exchanged. Everything looked normal. But I felt like I was walking on thin ground. At one point, someone asked Sanaa about the seating arrangement. She hesitated. She looked toward me. I did not respond. Not because I did not care, but because I was tired of deciding. She made a choice on her own. It was a small thing. But I could see the relief on her face. And then the doubt. Was this allowed? I realized then that my silence had made her unsure of herself. And that realization hurt deeply. Because I had never wanted to control her. I had only wanted peace. As the evening continued, small moments piled up. A dish was served later than expected. Someone commented lightly. Sanaa apologized. Again. Too quickly. Too often. I wanted to tell her to stop apologizing. But the words stayed inside me. Because I remembered apologizing like that myself. For years. Saad moved between rooms, speaking to relatives. He laughed. He seemed relaxed. I watched him carefully. I wondered if he could feel the tension. Or if it was invisible to him too. There was a moment during that gathering that stayed with me. Someone asked Sanaa a question about future plans. She answered softly. Then they turned to someone else for confirmation. As if her words needed approval. I felt something tighten in my chest. Because I had felt that same dismissal. Many times. I looked at Sanaa. She lowered her eyes. She accepted it. That acceptance frightened me. After the guests left, Sanaa cleaned quietly. I sat nearby. The silence between us felt heavy. Finally I spoke. "You don't have to do everything alone," I said gently. He paused. She looked at me. Her eyes filled slightly. "I know," she replied. But her voice did not sound convinced. That short exchange stayed with me. Because it revealed how far apart we had grown. Not in distance, but in understanding. I began to reflect more deeply. I realized that my invisibility had turned inward. I had stopped expressing my needs. And in doing so, I had created an environment where needs were never spoken. Not mine. Not Sanaa's. That silence was now affecting the whole house. Saad became quieter too. He spent more time away. He avoided being present during preparations. Perhaps he sensed something was wrong. Perhaps he did not want to choose sides. One evening, after a particularly tense gathering, Saad finally spoke. "Ami," he said carefully, "are you upset about something?" I looked at him. I wanted to tell him everything. How I felt replaced. How I felt invisible. How I worried about Sanaa. But the words felt too big. So I smiled. "No," I said. "I'm fine." He nodded. And that was the end of it. That moment made me realize how deep this conflict had grown. Even my own son could no longer see me clearly. Or perhaps I would not let him. Another gathering came. This one felt different from the beginning. Not louder. Not bigger. Just heavier. I sat quietly as people talked. Sanaa moved around as usual. But something in her had changed. She moved slower. She looked tired. At one point she sat down. Just for a moment. No one called her name. No one noticed. That silence was loud. I watched her. She looked relieved. Then guilty. She stood up again. That moment broke something inside me. Because I realized that both of us were trapped. Trapped by expectations we never questioned. Trapped by silence we mistook for strength. Trapped by roles we never chose out loud. Later that night I could not sleep. I thought about how conflict does not always come with raised voices. Sometimes it comes with exhaustion. Sometimes it comes with people shrinking. I saw that happening to Sanaa. And I saw it had already happened to me. That was when I understood something painful. Family gatherings were no longer celebrations. They were tests. Tests of endurance. Tests of silence. Tests of invisibility. And we were all failing in different ways. I began to feel a growing urgency. Something had to change. Because if it didn't, the silence would harden. And once silence hardens, it turns into distance. Distance between mother and son. Distance between women who should understand each other. Distance inside a home that once felt full. That realization marked the end of patience. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that has reached its limit. The conflict was no longer hidden. It was alive, waiting. The turning point did not arrive with anger. It arrived with exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones and makes pretending impossible. It happened on a day that was meant to be joyful. A large family gathering. More people than usual. More noise. More expectations. I woke up that morning feeling heavy. Not sick. Just tired in a way sleep cannot fix. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the house wake up. I heard Sanaa in the kitchen early as always. The sound of utensils. The tap running. She had started before anyone asked. That sound, which once comforted me, now filled me with worry. I walked slowly toward the kitchen. She was already busy. Her hair was tied back tightly. Her movements were quick but tense. "You woke up early," I said. She looked up startled. "Yes," she replied. "There's a lot to do." Her voice was calm. "Come." I watched her for a moment. She looked thinner, more tired. I wanted to tell her to slow down. But instead I said nothing. Because silence was my habit. As guests began to arrive, the house filled quickly. Voices overlapped. Laughter echoed. I sat in my usual place near the wall. I folded my hands. I told myself to stay calm. But something inside me felt different that day. Unsteady. I noticed Sanaa moving faster than usual. She served tea, snacks, meals. She barely paused. People praised her openly. "She does everything so well," someone said. I smiled politely. Inside a quiet ache grew. Because praise without rest can be another kind of burden. At one point, Sanaa nearly dropped a tray. She caught it just in time. No one noticed. Except me. My heart tightened. I stood up without thinking. "Sanaa," I said gently. "Sit for a moment." The room went quiet. Not completely, but enough. Sanaa froze. She looked at me. Her eyes widened slightly. "It's okay," she said quickly. "I'm fine." Her voice trembled. I stepped closer. "No," I said softly. "Sit." That word felt strange on my tongue. She hesitated. Then slowly, she placed the tray down and sat. Just for a moment. The room continued talking. Life moved on. But something important had happened. Sanaa sat with her hands in her lap. Her shoulders dropped. I saw relief cross her face. Then guilt. She stood up again almost immediately. She began. "Stay," I said quietly. She looked at me. Really looked at me. Something shifted between us. But before anything more could happen, someone called her name. "Sanaa, can you help?" She stood up again. Automatically, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Because I realized how deep this ran. It was not about one gathering. It was about years. The gathering continued. But I was no longer present. I was watching. Watching Sana push herself. Watching myself sit silently. Watching Saad move between people unaware. Then it happened. The moment that broke the silence. A relative made a casual comment. Nothing cruel. Just careless. Sana is so good, they said. Much better than before. Everything runs smoothly now. They laughed lightly. Others nodded. I felt my breath catch. I looked at Sana. She smiled weakly. She said nothing. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, but completely. I realized then that my invisibility had turned into replacement. And Sana's dedication had turned into expectation. Both of us were trapped. And no one would free us unless someone spoke. I stood up. My legs trembled. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply spoke. Please, I said gently. Let Sana rest. The room fell quiet. All eyes turned toward me. My heart pounded. I had not been the center of attention in a long time. Sana looked shocked. Saad looked confused. Continued. She works very hard, I said. Too hard. My voice shook slightly. She does not need to do everything. Silence. Someone cleared their throat. The conversation slowly resumed. But something had changed. I sat back down. My hands were shaking. I had spoken. That small moment felt like crossing a line. Later, after the guests left, the house felt strange. Quiet. Heavy. Sana stood in the kitchen. I stood near the doorway. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally she turned to me. Amy, she said softly. I didn't mean. I stopped her gently. I know, I said. My voice broke. I know. That was the moment. The real turning point. Because for the first time I allowed myself to feel everything. The loss. The guilt. The fear. I sat down heavily. Tears filled my eyes. I didn't realize, I said slowly, that my silence was hurting both of us. Sana's eyes filled too. She sat beside me. For the first time in a long time. I didn't know what was right, she whispered. I was afraid to do wrong. Those words hit me deeply. 'Cause I had lived my life the same way. Afraid to do wrong. Afraid to speak. And now here we were. Two women. Bound by love and silence. And finally by honesty. After that day, the air in the house felt different. Not lighter, not yet. But tense in a new way. The kind of tension that demands honesty. I stayed seated in the living room, my hands folded. Sana came and stood in front of me, hesitant. Amy, she said softly. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to help. I looked at her. Her eyes were tired, her smile small. The weight of months reflected in her posture. I know, Beta, I said gently. I see it now. I've been silent too long. And I've let this happen. She blinked. I thought I was doing everything right. That I was being good. But I always felt like I could never do enough. I felt my heart tighten. I understand, I whispered. I did the same thing once. For years I thought doing everything perfectly meant I was loved, that I was needed. And I didn't speak. And now, I see that it hurt both of us. Sana's hands trembled slightly as she reached out. She placed one hand over mine. The warmth of it anchored me. I was afraid to speak, she said. I didn't want anyone to be angry. I didn't want to upset you or Saad. But I felt invisible sometimes too. Her words echoed my own thoughts. Suddenly, the months of quiet tension made sense. You were never invisible, Beta, I said softly. You were seen, but I never made room for you to feel seen the way you deserved. Tears fell silently down my cheeks. I hadn't realized how much I had held inside, the sadness, the regret, the fear that I had passed my own silence onto her. Sana bent closer. I just wanted to help. I didn't want to take over. You never did, I said gently. But we both forgot how to speak, how to share space, how to ask for what we need. We sat together in silence for a long moment, and no words were necessary. The presence alone said more than years of polite smiles and nods ever had. Finally I looked up at her. Sana, I said slowly. Tomorrow we will do it differently. In the next gathering you will sit when you want, speak when you want, and I will step back in a way that makes sense for both of us. Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded. I would like that. Saad entered the room quietly. He had been listening from the doorway. Emmy. Sana, he said softly. Is everything okay? I smiled, softly shaking my head. Yes, Beta, I said. We finally understand each other. He hesitated, then joined us on the couch. He looked from me to Sana. And will this change things? He asked. Yes, I said. It has to. Because silence has caused too much distance. Sana reached for his hand. I was afraid to speak, afraid to upset anyone. But now, I feel like I can. Saad squeezed her hand gently. And I need to pay more attention too, he said. I didn't realize how quiet you both had become in your own ways. I nodded. Yes, Beta. We all did this together. Without meaning to. But now we can change it. That night we spoke long into the evening. Not about accusations, not about blame. But about feelings. About how invisible silence had made us feel. Sana admitted she sometimes felt like a guest in her own home. She feared making mistakes. She feared disapproval. I admitted I had felt replaced. Ignored. Diminished. And Saad admitted he had been unaware. He had thought everything was fine because there were no arguments, no loud complaints. We realized that invisibility does not arrive with shouting. It arrives quietly, when voices are suppressed and feelings go unspoken. By the time the night ended, there was a sense of relief. Not a sudden happiness, but a soft, steady warmth. I watched Sana walk to the kitchen to pour herself a cup of tea. She paused and looked back at me. Our eyes met. A small, understanding smile passed between us. I realized then that the turning point was not a single moment of confrontation. It was this quiet acknowledgement. The recognition of years of silent struggle. We had reached the moment where honesty was necessary. And speaking finally changed everything. The following days brought small changes. During the next family gathering, I noticed them immediately. Sana sat down at the table without hesitation. She laughed. She moved freely. No one corrected her. I felt the space between us shift. It was subtle, but present, like sunlight slipping through curtains. Saad stayed closer. He asked for our opinions. He included both of us in decisions. The house felt alive in a way it had not for months. For the first time in a long time I felt present. Truly present. Not just a shadow in my own home. And I saw Sana as fully present too. The turning point was not about victory. It was about recognition. Recognition that silence had been hurting us. Recognition that feelings mattered. Recognition that family could be whole without anyone disappearing. For the first time I allowed myself to hope. Hope that gatherings would no longer be tests of endurance. Hope that service could coexist with rest. Hope that being visible did not mean being selfish. I understood something vital that night. Family is not measured by who serves the most, or who smiles the brightest, or who stands the longest. Family is measured by presence. By honesty. By allowing each other to exist fully. And that lesson, painful as it was to learn, became the bridge. Between mother and daughter-in-law. Between son and both of us. Between silence and voice. For the first time I felt it. The shift. The change. We had crossed the turning point. After that turning point, life in our home began to feel different. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But slowly, quietly, with small gestures that carried more meaning than words. I noticed the way Sana moved through the house now. She paused less often. She laughed more easily. She spoke her thoughts freely without hesitation. At the next family gathering, I watched her place plates on the table. She looked up and caught my eyes. And this time, I saw no hesitation, no guilt, no fear. Just presence. I felt a warmth spread through me. It was strange. Because I had not realized how much I had missed seeing her simply exist in the space she deserved. Saad stayed close that day. He asked my opinion, he listened carefully, he even gently reminded others to give Sana space. It was small. But in that small act I could see him understanding. I realized then that the resolution did not come from one speech, one argument, or one realization. It came from many quiet decisions. The first was mine to speak, to break the silence. The second was Sana's, to accept that she could rest, to allow herself to exist without fear. And the third was Saad's, to notice, to include, to respect. That was the beginning of restoration. After that gathering, we stayed up later than usual. Sana brought tea, I offered her a seat. She smiled and sat. We spoke softly, as if sharing secrets. I feel lighter, she said quietly. I didn't realize how heavy I had been carrying everything. I reached for her hand. Beta, I said. I didn't either. I thought staying quiet was protection. But it wasn't. It was invisibility. She nodded. I understand now, she whispered. And I'm glad we can speak. Saad leaned back on the couch, watching us. I should have noticed sooner, he said. You both deserve to be seen. That evening I realized something important. Resolution is not a dramatic confrontation. Resolution is the quiet understanding that follows honesty. That follows acknowledgement. That follows the willingness to change. Over the following weeks, I saw our family life shift in subtle ways. I no longer felt invisible, I no longer waited silently for permission to act. Sana no longer carried every responsibility alone. She asked for help. She accepted it. And Saad noticed. Our home began to feel full again. Not in noise, but in presence. During family gatherings, I no longer sat quietly on the edge. I chose a seat in the center sometimes. Not to assert authority. Not to be noticed. But because I belonged there. I began to speak softly when needed. I laughed when a story amused me. I offered guidance gently, without stepping on anyone's space. Sana began to do the same. We found a rhythm together. A rhythm where we could both exist fully. Without fear. Without hesitation. One day, Saad asked us to sit together while the preparations for a gathering were underway. We should plan this together, he said. And let everyone contribute, but not forget the work we've already done. That moment felt like healing. Because it acknowledged the past without blame. Because it created space for the future. I watched Sana smile, relaxed and confident. I watched Saad move through the house, attentive, gentle. And I felt myself fully present again. No one had shouted, no one had demanded, no one had accused. We simply chose to see each other. That choice made all the difference. As the weeks turned into months, I realized how much we had all grown. Sana learned that she could speak. She could rest. She could exist without fear. I learned that I could ask, that I could guide, that I could reclaim my presence without overshadowing others. Saad learned that listening matters. That noticing matters. That family is not only about love but also about acknowledgement. The gatherings became gentle celebrations again. Everyone had their place. Everyone had a voice. And I no longer felt invisible. One evening, after a particularly joyful gathering, I sat on the couch with Sana. The house was quiet. Amy, she said softly, I'm glad we can talk like this. I feel understood now. I reached for her hand. And I'm glad I can see you clearly. Not as a helper. Not as someone I guide. But as a person. Fully present. She nodded. And I feel I can be myself without fear. That means so much. I realized then that the resolution was not just about the house or the gatherings. It was about relationships. About seeing and being seen. About understanding that silence can protect, but it can also hide. And that truth, spoken quietly and received gently, can heal years of unnoticed struggle. That night I reflected on everything. On my own mistakes, on my fears, on my years of quiet obedience and careful service. And I realized that resolution does not erase the past. It does not erase the feelings of invisibility. But it creates a new path. A path where silence is no longer a prison. where voice is welcomed, where love is accompanied by acknowledgement. From that moment, family gatherings became something I looked forward to again, not because everything was perfect, but because now everyone had a place. Everyone had a voice. And everyone could rest without fear. I saw it in Sanaa, and I saw it in Saad. And most importantly, I saw it in myself. The resolution was quiet, gentle, and heartfelt. It was soft. But it was real. And it stayed with me, guiding every gathering from that day forward. As the days passed after that realization, life in our home changed in small but profound ways. Sanaa began to ask for help when she needed it. She no longer carried the weight of every dish, every task, every expectation. I noticed it first during the morning preparations for a family gathering. She came into the kitchen with a tray of pastries. "I'll serve these," she said softly. "But could you help me arrange the drinks?" I smiled gently. "Yes, Beta," I said. "Let's do it together." And we did. Side by side, working quietly, sharing space without competition. The rhythm felt natural. Balanced. Healing. Saad walked past, pausing briefly. He observed us silently, then whispered, "I like seeing this." I nodded without words. Because seeing is often more powerful than speaking. Over the next few gatherings, these small gestures became our new way. I learned to step in and step back intentionally, to guide without overshadowing, to rest without guilt. Sanaa learned to speak when she needed to, and to step aside when someone else wanted space. Saad learned to notice the invisible moments. The pauses. The looks. The quiet exhaustion that used to go unseen. During one gathering, a relative remarked, "It feels different today. Calmer, happier." I realized then that resolution is not always about grand gestures. It is about subtle shifts in behavior. About balance. About the courage to speak and the humility to listen. That evening, I watched Sanaa sit at the table, laughing freely with our guests. She was present, confident, relaxed. I felt a swelling of pride, not just as a mother-in-law, but as a woman who had walked the same path, who had carried the same fears, who had learned the same lessons. After everyone left, the three of us, Saad, Sanaa, and I, sat together quietly in the living room. No words were needed at first. Just the comfort of shared presence. Finally, Saad spoke. "I'm sorry I didn't see it before," he said. "I didn't realize how much silence had built between us all." I reached for his hand. "It's okay, Beta," I said softly. "We all did what we thought was right. But now we see each other clearly." Sanaa nodded. "And I've learned I can exist fully without fear. And I'm grateful for your guidance. And your honesty, Ami." Her words touched me deeply. I realized that resolution is not about assigning blame, that it is about acknowledgement. It is about recognizing the hurt, even if it was unintentional. The next weeks brought a new kind of peace into our home. We celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and small moments with laughter instead of tension. The kitchen was a place of shared work. The dining room was a place of shared joy. No one carried the burden alone. I began to notice how much energy I had regained. I could sit and converse with relatives without fading into the background. I could guide the arrangements without feeling replaced. I could see and hear Sanaa as an equal. And she saw me. During a quiet afternoon, we sat together in the living room, folding napkins for an upcoming gathering. Sanaa looked at me and smiled. "I feel like we finally understand each other," she said softly. "Yes, Beta," I replied. "We do. And that understanding is what makes this house feel like home again." Saad entered the room, carrying a tray of tea. He handed it to both of us and said, "I'm happy we can all work together. It feels right." And in that moment I felt it too. The heaviness had lifted. The invisibility had faded. The home we shared was no longer divided by silent expectations. I realized something important. Resolution does not erase the past. It does not erase the months of tension or the years of quiet suffering. But it transforms them. It creates space for understanding. It allows love to flow without suffocation. It allows presence to be acknowledged. I saw it in Sanaa's laughter, I saw it in Saad's attentiveness, I saw it in my own heart, lighter and more open than it had been in years. Even in ordinary moments, washing dishes together, setting the table, preparing tea, we felt the change. Family gatherings became celebrations again. Not of perfection but of presence. Not of service but of shared joy. Not of control but of care. I often reflected quietly on what had brought us to this point. It was the courage to speak. The courage to acknowledge pain. The courage to notice each other. And in that reflection, I learned the most important lesson. Love without recognition can fade into invisibility. But recognition, when coupled with empathy, restores connection. I began to notice small details that had gone unseen for years. Sanaa's careful gestures, Saad's quiet attentiveness. The laughter that had returned to our home. I allowed myself to feel gratitude for these moments. Gratitude for honesty. Gratitude for patience. Gratitude for understanding. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, our home began to glow again. Not in brightness or noise, but in warmth, presence, mutual respect. That is the essence of resolution. Not a loud celebration. Not a dramatic reconciliation. But the quiet, gentle, heartfelt return of life and love to its rightful place. I often sit quietly these days, reflecting on the journey we have walked together. The gatherings, the silence, the subtle tension, they all taught me something profound. I think about those days when I first realized that my presence had faded into the background. It wasn't a sudden moment. It was slow. Invisible at first, then undeniable. But now, I understand that invisibility is not caused by others. It is caused when we forget to speak our truth. When we hide our needs. When we assume that silence is protection. I wish I had realized it sooner. I wish I had spoken before the quiet tension grew so heavy. But regret is a teacher, not a prison. And it taught me to notice, to acknowledge, to care not just for others but for myself as well. Sanaa has grown in ways that fill my heart with quiet pride. She is no longer afraid to speak. She rests when she needs to. She laughs without hesitation. I see her confidence and realize how much strength she carries. And it is not just strength in serving. It is strength in being seen. I watch her interactions during gatherings now. She stands with grace. She sits with ease. She speaks with confidence. And when I look at her, I see a reflection of the lessons we have both learned. Saad has grown too. He listens more carefully. He notices the quiet moments. He includes both of us in ways he never did before. And I see the love in his eyes, not just for me, but for the family we are rebuilding together. Life feels lighter in our home. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is shared. The work, the laughter, the care, the love, they are all shared. Even in small gestures there is meaning. When Sanaa pours tea, I no longer feel compelled to rush. When I offer guidance, she no longer feels threatened. When Saad mediates, he does so with care and respect. And together we have found a rhythm that is gentle, kind, and full of warmth. I often remember the moments that led us here. The evenings when I sat silently watching. The moments when Sanaa nearly disappeared in her own home. The times when Saad didn't realize what was happening. They were hard, but they were necessary. Because without them, we would not have recognized the importance of presence, voice, of acknowledgement. I have come to understand that family is not measured by tasks done perfectly or gatherings managed flawlessly. It is measured by presence, by love expressed, by attention given, and by the courage to notice one another, even when life is busy and loud. I think back to the first turning point, when I finally spoke, when I told Sanaa to rest. It was a quiet moment, but it shifted everything. It reminded me that one act of honesty can ripple through a home. And it reminded me that visibility begins with acknowledgement. Acknowledgement of yourself. Acknowledgement of those around you. Acknowledgement that everyone deserves to exist fully. I feel this lesson deeply now. It is part of my daily life. Even small gatherings feel meaningful. Even ordinary moments carry warmth. Because we have learned to see each other. Truly see. And in that seeing there is healing. Sanaa and I often talk quietly after a long day of hosting relatives. We share memories. We share thoughts. We share laughter. Sometimes we sit in silence. And in that silence there is peace. No one feels invisible anymore. Not her. Not me. Not even Saad. We have learned to inhabit our home fully. To take up space gently but firmly. To speak when needed. And to listen always. I have also learned that invisibility can teach empathy. Because once you have felt unseen, you notice when others might be invisible. I notice Sanaa when she carries more than she should. I notice Saad when he withdraws into himself. I notice our guests when they hesitate to speak. And I gently guide them into being seen. Because presence is contagious. And visibility can grow when nurtured. I sometimes close my eyes and think about the quiet pain that once filled our gatherings. And I am grateful. Grateful that it led to understanding. Grateful that it led to connection. Grateful that it led to this warmth, this calm, this family that feels whole again. I reflect on the simplicity of the lesson. Notice. Acknowledge. Even a small word can restore a home. Even a gentle gesture can heal invisible wounds. I feel a quiet pride, not in perfection, but in the courage to change, the courage to listen, the courage to care. The days settled into a rhythm I had almost forgotten existed. Mornings were quiet, with sunlight spilling softly through the windows. Sanaa would make tea, and I would sit beside her, chatting gently about the day ahead. Sometimes Saad would join us, and together we would plan the gatherings in a way that included everyone's thoughts and energy. Even small tasks became moments of connection. Setting the table, arranging flowers, preparing snacks. These were no longer chores. They were gestures of love and shared life. I realized that the true beauty of family is in these moments. Not in perfection. Not in appearances. But in presence. In laughter that can be heard, not hidden. In words that are spoken, not swallowed. In care that is offered, not assumed. One afternoon, I watched Sanaa interact with a younger cousin. She guided him gently in setting the plates. She smiled freely. She laughed without hesitation. And I felt a surge of warmth. Because I knew how far she had come. I remembered her fear, her hesitation, her quiet suffering. And now, she moved through our home like a presence that belonged fully. I reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. "You've grown so much," I whispered. She smiled at me. "Because you saw me, Ami," she said. "You helped me exist fully. And I thank you for that." I felt tears gather in my eyes. Because in that simple exchange, I understood the full circle of our journey. It had started with invisibility, with silence, with unspoken tension, and it had ended with understanding, with presence, with love made visible. Saad entered the room, observing quietly. "I feel like our home is alive again," he said softly. "Like we are all really here with each other." I nodded. "Yes, Beta. Alive and seen. There is a peace in being noticed. Not in being praised. Not in being controlled. But in simply existing." I think about those family gatherings that once left me feeling invisible. I remember the weight, the quiet ache, the moments of hesitation and fear. And I am grateful for them. Because they led me to this understanding. This clarity. This gentle joy of shared life. The house now feels open. Even when filled with guests, there is no pressure. No one is forced into silence. No one feels replaced. Sanaa moves freely. I move freely. Saad moves attentively. We have learned that harmony is not about control. It is about listening. It is about sharing space. It is about allowing love to flow without constraining it. Sometimes I catch myself watching them. Watching Sanaa laugh. Watching Saad notice her small gestures. Watching the way they interact with our extended family. And I feel contentment. Not fleeting happiness. But steady, quiet warmth that settles in my chest. I have learned that being visible is a gift. And making others visible is an even greater gift. I reflect on the lessons learned. That silence, though often intended to protect, can wound. That courage is not always loud. That love is strongest when accompanied by attention, understanding, and care. That family is not about who serves the most, speaks the most, or controls the most. It is about being present, being acknowledged, being loved for simply existing. I've carried these lessons into every day. Even when gatherings are small or ordinary, I notice the quiet details. The soft smile of a relative. The careful movements of someone tired. The laughter that comes from the heart. And I feel gratitude. Gratitude for understanding. Gratitude for presence. Gratitude for the courage to speak, to listen, and to change. Sometimes I sit quietly in the evening, reflecting on how far we have come. Sanaa and I often share a cup of tea, speaking softly, laughing gently, and remembering moments that once felt heavy but now feel light. Saad joins us often, and together we create a rhythm of care, love, and acknowledgement that feels effortless and true. I realize now that invisibility is not permanent. That silence can be broken. That love, when paired with understanding, can restore what was lost. And I feel a gentle hope that guides me every day. That hope is not loud, does not demand attention. It simply exists, steady and true, in the quiet corners of our home, in the soft gestures, in the shared laughter, in the visible love between us. I close my eyes and take a deep breath, feeling fully present for the first time in years. I have a place in my home, a voice in my family, and a heart that is seen, understood, and connected. Family gatherings no longer make me feel invisible. They make me feel whole. And that is the greatest gift of all. Because at the end of it all, the lesson is simple. To be present, to see others, to speak, to listen, to love. And when we do, we create a home where everyone can exist fully, openly, and beautifully. That is the peace I carry now. That is the life I cherish. That is the warmth I share with Sanaa, with Saad, and with everyone who enters our home. We are visible. We are present. We are family. And I know, with a quiet certainty, that this is where I belong.